Dumeliso Katrina Patricia Vanamamkara. I want to tell you a story that I had today, ne? And it's a story that I think if you are following my story or someone has heard of my story, they will probably relate. So I am at a global summit for young professionals in aviation um, or looking at the future of young aviators um, in the aviation industry. And this professor gave a narrative about a guy who did engineering. I think it's aeronautical engineering. And he said that the guy took 13 years, 13 years finishing or doing a 4-year degree. When I heard him starting with the narration, I'm like, I thought I took the most, I took 9 years doing a 4-year degree. And then I come to hear that someone took 13 years. And he gave the narration that the professor gave the narration that the guy was excluded about 3 times, and he would be excluded and appeal, excluded and appeal. So he eventually finished. But when the professor came closer to the situation, he realized that this guy actually did not even have a place to stay. He says that the guy at some point was staying under the bridge, which is what we call a hobo, or yeah, a homeless person anyway. But he finished that degree in 13 years, and the professor was just talking about the what he learned about the determination of that guy, and the professor says that that guy actually ended up being one of the best guys in the aviation industry. And the professor was just saying that of everything that he could talk about, he was just talking about the determination of that specific guy. And he was indicating that sometimes investing in young people is the most rewarding thing that one can actually do, because once someone is determined, even if it takes them 13 years to finish a 4-year degree, it it remains such a fulfilling moment. And when I when I heard that story, it happened earlier today. Uh, uh, I was like, sometimes we think we have been through the worst in life. Sometimes we think that we we are the ones that can tell the worst that has ever happened in our lives, until you hear someone's story and you realize that you know god god gives us grace. And obviously, as they say, he would only allow so much for you to go through, because he knows the scale of the grace that he's going to give you. He knows that so much you can handle. And it's such an interesting thing that, in as much as I could really go on and say it took me 9 years, apparently today I had 13 years 13 years it took someone. That's 4 years more than the years that I took, and it's it's such. It was just such a moment to reflect, to say, you know what, we think we are going through the most, but just hang on. There is someone who is going through even worse than you are going through, even worse than you have gone through. And while we sit and reflect, I think it is always the best that we just thank God for the grace, because when you start to hear other people's experiences, you realize that, you know what, God, you have been good to me, because the worst could have happened. Um, when I look at the moment where I got my um, the letters that were telling me that it is over with my academic journey at university, it was such a low moment. But imagine someone having to go through it 3 times. But I did ask myself a few questions, like, okay, in my case, they gave me the letter. I wrote the letter to, or I responded to the letter. They accepted me back. And in my case, they were very strict that I am going to learn, or to come back to the university per semester. I was actually given a semester a time to finish the first semester, finish the second semester, and then we will take it from there. So obviously, one doesn't know the conditions that this other guy that I heard about today, what conditions were there for him to proceed in such a way that he could have even been dismissed 3 times and came back. Obviously, I don't have the context. The one thing that one maybe can do is to speak to the professor after, when we are done with the day, or we are currently on lunch. That's why I'm having this opportunity to record this. So, but whichever way it is, if this story is true that indeed someone took 13 years to finish a 4-year degree, then I sit and realize that, you know what, God, you have been good to me, and of course you have been good to everyone in all situations. But when you start to evaluate per situation, you realize that every time you go through something, every time you feel like this is the end of the world for you, just know that there's someone who's definitely going through worse than what you're going through. And yes, I heard about this, and I'm like, if this story is true, then head off to that person, because he could really deal with worse than what I dealt with. And although I really thank God for my journey, I also know that he he absolutely did it, and he did it for someone else who took the 13 years compared to my 9 years. It remains a fact that when you go through something, someone is going through worse than yourself, and one should only thank God for giving us challenges that He knows that we can handle, and He's obviously given us enough grace to handle those situations. Yes, thanks for watching. Thank you for supporting. Let's invest in young people. Let's pay forward what God has done in our lives. Let's pay forward what God has invested in our lives for the next generation after us. God bless. My name is Pumuzo Mufatuchezwa Vorachitanga Abebwele. Mr. BBL to you, signing out of eThekwini, Durban ICC, at the World Summit, Global Summit for ICAO.